Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me once again on this exciting journey where we dive deep into the fascinating world of rare coins, unbelievable minting stories, and hidden treasures that might be sitting right inside your pocket change. And today's story is going to take you on an extraordinary ride because we are talking about the 2017 D1 cent coin. A coin that most people overlook without a second thought, yet in the world of rare discoveries and unbelievable minting blunders, this humble penny has gained a mythical reputation for being one of the most surprising pieces ever rumored to reach a staggering $7 million in value, and as we move through this entire exploration together, get ready to uncover every possible mint error, die flaw, striking anomaly, metal composition mistake, and unimaginable accident that collectors speculate could make this simple Lincoln cent skyrocket from a 1-cent coin to a multi-million-dollar treasure. So settle in, because today we explore every detail, every theory, every rumor, every mistake, and every rare anomaly that pushes the idea of the 2017 D penny into legendary status, turning it into one of the most talked about modern coins in numismatic circles. And the story begins with understanding how millions of these coins were produced by the Denver Mint in 2017, a year when the mint was running massive production numbers to meet national circulation demands. And whenever production ramps up at such a high volume, the possibility of rare and unexpected mistakes increases, because when thousands of dies are used, countless planchets are fed into machines, and high-speed striking presses are constantly operating. Even the smallest misalignment, the tiniest crack, the slightest contamination, or the briefest malfunction can create an error coin that becomes an instant legend. And among collectors, the whispers of a specific 2017 D penny with a cluster of impossible errors began circulating, describing a coin that seems to combine multiple rare flaws into one, and that is part of what fuels the $7 million myth, because collectors speculate that only one such coin may exist, a coin that escaped detection, entered circulation, and to this day lies unrecognized in someone's jar, drawer, pocket, or forgotten roll of pennies. And to understand how any coin could reach such an unbelievable valuation, we have to explore all the potential errors that could theoretically combine to make such a specimen priceless, beginning with the idea of a double-struck off-center coin, where the first strike lands partially off the planchet, leaving incomplete details, and then the second strike hits the already flawed coin but perfectly centers the second strike, creating a dramatic layering of design impressions. And with the 2017 D penny, collectors imagine a version where Lincoln's bust appears stretched or doubled, where the lettering bends unnaturally, where the date shows splitting or distortion, and where the mint mark D shifts from its original position, blending the effects of a misaligned die and a double strike in a way so unusual that the resulting appearance is one of a kind. And imagine further if such a coin also possessed an incorrect metal planchet error, a situation where a blank intended for a foreign coin, or a leftover experimental test planchet, was accidentally fed into the machine, causing the 2017 D designed to be struck on a metallic surface with the wrong weight, wrong thickness, or wrong color, and if the coin was struck on a bronze planchet rather than the copper-plated zinc composition used since 1982, it would immediately stand out by weight alone, creating even more speculation about its origins. And then add the possibility of a broad strike error where the retaining collar fails to hold the coin properly during the strike, causing the metal to expand outward beyond normal size while still retaining full details, forming a stretched, dish-like appearance that collectors famously pay huge premiums for. And now imagine combining all these errors together in a single 2017 D penny, an off-center double strike on a foreign or experimental planchet, expanded in diameter from a broad strike, and struck using a die that itself suffered from cracks, creating raised lines across Lincoln's portrait or the Union Shield reverse. And when a die crack spreads across the coin in the right pattern, some collectors refer to it as a lightning strike, a spiderweb crack, or even a broken die shatter effect. And these dramatic cracks can turn ordinary coins into highly desirable pieces. And if such cracks also intersect with double details, distorted lettering, or irregular metal surfaces, the result becomes something the collecting world has never seen before. And now picture this coin exhibiting a rare die rotation error, where instead of the obverse and reverse being properly aligned at 180 degrees, the reverse is rotated at a strange angle, 15 degrees, 50 degrees, even 90 degrees, creating a visually shocking appearance when the coin is flipped, and rotation errors are immediately noticeable and highly collectible. and adding such a flaw to a coin already filled with multiple anomalies pushes the rarity beyond anything the mint would normally produce. And then consider the possibility of a struck-through error occurring at the moment of striking, where a piece of lint, metal shaving, grease, or other debris covers part of the planchet or die surface during the strike, leaving behind a void, indentation, or missing detail on the coin, and grease-filled die errors can make entire letters appear faded, half-formed, or completely missing, causing the motto "In God We Trust" or the word liberty or even the date itself to appear smeared, incomplete, or ghost-like. And collectors value such mistakes highly, especially when the affected areas intersect with larger errors like misaligned strikes or planchet flaws. And now imagine the impossible: a coin combining a struck-through error, a double strike, a broad strike, a misaligned die, and a wrong planchet composition all in one, something that should never logically occur. Yet the numismatic world thrives on stories of impossible coins that somehow slipped through, and this is where the legend of the $7 million 2017 D penny grows, because collectors love the idea of chasing the rarest of the rare, the one mythical piece that carries every dramatic error imaginable. And when you add the possibility of a partial collar strike, where the collar only partially secures the planchet during striking, causing one side of the coin to flare out or show a railroad rim effect with vertical striping along the edge, the coin becomes even more unusual. And then imagine combining that with a die clash, an error that occurs when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, imprinting traces of the opposite design into each die. And when those dies go back to striking normal planchets, the resulting coins display faint overlays of reversed features from the other side of the coin, such as parts of the shield appearing behind Lincoln's head or outlines of Lincoln showing faintly behind the Union shield. And collectors love die clashes because they reveal the physical accident that occurred inside the minting machine. And if the mythical $7 million 2017 D penny had even the slightest trace of such a clash, overlapping with cracks, doubling, wrong metal composition, and misstrikes, it would become unlike any modern cent ever discovered, making it irresistible to collectors who value uniqueness above all. And since modern pennies are made with extremely thin copper plating over zinc, plating errors also become a factor. And sometimes the copper layer bonds incorrectly, causing bubbling, peeling, pits, or exposed zinc areas. And severe plating blisters make the surface look like it has raised bumps or distorted metal pockets. And if the rumored ultra-rare 2017 D penny had extreme plating bubbles on both sides combined with all previously mentioned errors, the result would be so visually dramatic that collectors might be willing to pay extraordinary sums simply because no other example exists. And another possibility is a mule error, where the obverse of a 2017 D cent is accidentally paired with a reverse die meant for a completely different coin, such as a dime or a foreign denomination. And although such an event is nearly impossible, mule coins have historically fetched millions of dollars because they represent catastrophic die-pairing mistakes that should never occur at a professional minting facility. And even the rumor of a mule-struck 2017 D penny fuels its legendary status, with some collectors imagining a Lincoln obverse struck against a Roosevelt dime reverse or another foreign reverse, creating a coin that instantly becomes priceless. And even if this mule idea remains purely speculative, the mere possibility enhances the mythical valuation because the story carries intrigue, mystery, and the thrill of the unknown. And now imagine if this coin also displayed repunched mint mark characteristics, where the D mint mark appears doubled, shifted, or layered due to hand-punching inconsistencies, a feature common on older coins but extremely next 2011 1-cent coin. Everyone, and thank you for joining me once again on this incredible journey into the world of rare coins, hidden treasures, unbelievable minting mistakes, and extraordinary discoveries that might be sitting unnoticed in a pocket, purse, or forgotten drawer. And today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and mind-blowing stories in modern numismatics. The legend of the 2011 1-cent coin that many collectors believe could theoretically reach a staggering $6 million in value because of the rare, dramatic, and almost impossible mint errors that some speculate may exist on a single example somewhere out there. And as we explore this in detail, get ready to go deep into every possible error, every unusual flaw, every strange anomaly, and every theoretical minting accident that could transform an ordinary 2011 penny into a multimillion-dollar masterpiece. And from this moment forward we embark on a long, uninterrupted journey into the world of Minting mechanics, striking failures, die deterioration, planchet irregularities, structural distortions, and rare combinations of errors so dramatic and so unlikely that collectors would value such a coin at levels beyond imagination. And to begin this exploration, we first understand that the 2011 Lincoln Shield cent was produced in massive quantities, with billions minted using high-speed machinery, and whenever production reaches such enormous levels, the probability of unusual errors, although small, becomes possible, and this is where the mythical $6 million 2011 penny enters the conversation, a coin rumored among collectors to contain an impossible combination of dramatic anomalies. And as we move deeper into this discussion, we must explore every mint error type that could theoretically combine to make such a coin infinitely desirable, beginning with the powerful and visually striking off-center error, where the planchet is not fully seated in the striking chamber, and the dies land partially off the metal blank, creating a coin where part of Lincoln's portrait is pushed to the side, or part of the Union Shield reverse is dramatically missing. And imagine if the strike was 50%, 60%, or even 80% off-center while still retaining the visible date 2011, something collectors treasure because a visible date makes the coin dramatically more valuable. And then picture an additional layer of error on top of this, such as a double strike where the coin is struck a second time after the first off-center impression, but the second strike lands fully centered, creating overlapping images, doubled lettering, stretched features, split dates, and distorted outlines that turn the coin into a chaotic yet mesmerizing piece of art created entirely by accident inside the mint. And now imagine adding a rare wrong planchet error, where the blank used for the coin was not the standard copper-plated zinc planchet but a foreign coin planchet of slightly different weight and composition, perhaps showing unusual coloration, showing more bronze-like tones or lighter metallic hues. And wrong planchet errors are some of the most valuable in numismatics, with some examples fetching tens or hundreds of thousands. And if the mythical $6 million 2011 penny was struck on a leftover foreign blank or an experimental test planchet, its rarity would immediately skyrocket, especially if combined with dramatic striking errors. And next consider the possibility of a broad strike error, where the metal expands outward like a pancake because the retaining collar that normally holds the coin in place during striking fails, causing the edges to stretch outward, leaving the coin without its normal raised rim. And if this broad strike occurred simultaneously with a significant off-center strike or a double strike, the coin would appear even more unusual, larger than normal and completely misshapen yet retaining recognizable details, and this alone could attract enormous collector interest. But now consider another dramatic minting flaw, the die crack or even the die break error, where the die used to strike the coin develops fractures, creating raised lines, lightning bolt patterns, or even missing metal areas on the struck coin. And when these die cracks become large enough, they form what collectors call a cud, a blob-like raised area along the rim where part of the die has broken away completely. And cud errors are highly prized, and if the hypothetical $6 million penny contained a massive cud on one side, combined with an off-center double strike, broad strike expansion, and wrong metal planchet, the result would be an impossible combination of errors that could only exist in one single example, making it effectively priceless. And imagine further if the coin also displayed rotation error, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned by 30, 60, or even 180 degrees, creating a startling visual effect when the coin is flipped, because collectors immediately recognize rotation errors and value them highly, especially when paired with other major mistakes. And now picture the possibility of a die clash error, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, imprinting faint reversed images of each side into the opposite die. And when the dies return to striking planchets, these clashed images appear as ghostly outlines behind Lincoln's bust or behind the lines of the Union Shield. And die clashes are some of the most visually stunning and mysterious errors in minting. And if the $6 million 2011 penny possessed dramatic clash die features in addition to everything else we've mentioned, its desirability would climb even further. And now layer on the possibility of a struck-through error, where a piece of lint, grease, metal shaving, cloth fiber, or debris became trapped between the die and the planchet during the strike, leaving behind missing details, indented shapes, or ghost-like impressions on the finished coin. And in extreme cases entire letters or parts of the design disappear due to grease-filled dies, a situation where the die cavities become clogged with debris, causing Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 2011 to appear partially missing or smeared. And if collectors discovered a 2011 penny with both a dramatic struck-through error and a multi-layered double strike, off-center shift, or broad strike expansion, the uniqueness would be unmatched. And now imagine adding plating errors to the mix, such as copper plating bubbles, blistering, peeling, or exposure of raw zinc beneath the surface, creating unpredictable distortions in color and texture that make the coin stand out visually. And plating errors alone do not typically command millions, but when joined with other dramatic minting anomalies, they enhance the overall rarity and uniqueness of the hypothetical multimillion-dollar coin. And now consider the nearly impossible but historically documented error known as a mule, where the obverse of one coin is struck with the reverse of another coin, such as pairing the 2011 cent obverse with a reverse meant for a dime or foreign denomination, an accident so catastrophic that only a few mules in history exist, and they sell for seven-figure prices when they appear. And even though there is no known mule for the 2011 cent, the mere possibility fuels speculation among enthusiasts who love imagining the existence of such a coin. And if such a mule existed, especially combined with dramatic striking errors, it would easily be valued in the millions, further contributing to the mythical valuation of the theoretical $6 million 2011 penny. And another factor collectors imagine is a partial collar strike, where the coin is only partially held by the retaining collar during striking, causing one side of the rim to flare outward or display what is known as a railroad rim, with vertical lines along the edge resembling train tracks. And if this partial collar was combined with a broad strike or off-center strike, the edges of the coin would appear wildly uneven and instantly recognizable as rare. And now imagine another layer, a triple strike, something so rare and visually chaotic that collectors often pay massive premiums for them, especially when the shifts between strikes are dramatic enough to create multiple overlapping dates, letters, and distorted shapes, giving the impression that the coin was struck 3 different times as it moved unpredictably between each die impact. And if a 2011 penny existed with 3 overlapping strike patterns, wrong planchet composition, clashed dies, plating blisters, and a major cut, such a coin could be considered one of the most extraordinary mint errors ever documented, easily commanding multi-million-dollar valuations from advanced collectors or museums. And next imagine that the coin also contained microscopic die polishing lines that distorted features in strange ways, or hub-doubling anomalies where elements of the design appear double due to die creation errors, creating double dies that collectors obsessively seek. And while 2011 double dies exist in minor forms, the mythical $6 million version would theoretically contain extreme doubling, stretching the date, enlarging parts of Lincoln's eye, duplicating details. Next, 1987 D1 cent coin. And thank you once again for joining me on this incredible journey into the world of rare coins, unbelievable minting mistakes, hidden treasures, and astonishing discoveries that might be sitting quietly in your pocket, your drawer, your jar of loose change, or somewhere deep inside an old roll of pennies. And today we are diving into one of the most fascinating, exciting, and mind-bending stories in modern numismatics, the legendary tale of the 1987 D. Lincoln 1 cent coin that some collectors speculate could theoretically reach a staggering $5 million in value if the right combination of rare, dramatic, and nearly impossible minting errors were ever discovered on a single specimen. And because collectors are always searching for the next impossible treasure, the idea of a multi-million-dollar 1987 D penny has grown into one of the most thrilling fantasies in the world of coin hunting. And in this incredibly deep dive we will explore every possible mint error, every unusual anomaly, every conceivable striking accident, every dream-level combination of mistakes, and every numismatic possibility that could transform an ordinary 1987 D penny into the kind of coin that would send shockwaves through auctions, collectors, museums, and enthusiasts around the world. And as we begin this exploration, we start by understanding that the 1987 D Lincoln cent was produced during a time when the U.S. Mint was striking hundreds of millions of coins per facility every month, and the Denver Mint especially was running at high speed to meet national demand. And whenever coin production runs at such extreme volume, even with advanced machinery and quality control systems, small mistakes can happen, and rare mistakes occasionally slip through. And when it comes to coins like the 1987 D penny, those mistakes can sometimes become the basis of legends, stories, theories, and possibilities that collectors love to imagine. And among them is The theoretical existence of a 1987 D penny whose combined errors are so rare, so dramatic, so visually shocking, and so impossibly unlikely that if such a coin existed, it could sell for millions of dollars. And now as we dive deeper into the heart of the minting process, the story becomes even more exciting because understanding how a coin like this could become valuable requires us to examine every type of error that could theoretically occur, starting with one of the most powerful and visually dramatic mistakes in numismatics, the off-center strike, where the planchet fails to sit centered in the striking chamber and the die hits the blank partially off the surface, creating a coin where Lincoln's portrait is pushed far to one side, the date appears at the edge or missing entirely, or the reverse design is drastically shifted, and collectors love off-center errors, especially those around 40% to 80% off-center while still showing the date, because a visible date significantly increases desirability. And now imagine the possibility that a 1987 D penny was struck 70% off-center but still retained the date 1987 and the D mint mark fully visible, making it rare enough already. But then imagine adding another layer on top of this, a double strike, where the coin received a second blow after the first off-center strike. And this second strike lands partly over the first impression, creating doubling effects, overlapping letters, distorted shapes, and wild visuals that immediately make collectors stare in disbelief. And then imagine if the second strike landed fully centered, stacking a normal impression right on top of an off-center one, creating a breathtaking display of layered design elements that should not exist on any normal cent. And then imagine adding a third strike, creating a chaotic triple struck effect, something that only a handful of coins in history possess. And such a combination alone would already place the coin among the rarest mint errors ever documented. But for a coin to reach $5 million, collectors imagine even more impossible scenarios, such as being struck on a wrong planchet, meaning the blank used for the coin was not the normal copper-plated zinc disc used in 1987, but rather a leftover foreign blank or transitional metal disc that somehow slipped into the striking press. And wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable mistakes in coin collecting, and if a 1987 D penny were struck on a planchet intended for a dime, a foreign coin, or an experimental piece, its weight, size, and coloration would be different from a normal cent, making it extremely desirable. And then imagine adding another layer of impossibility, like a dramatic broad strike error, where the collar that normally contains the metal during striking fails, causing the coin to expand outward in diameter like a pancake, eliminating its rim and giving it a strange, stretched appearance. And when such a broad strike occurs simultaneously with off-center or double strikes, the entire coin becomes an explosion of unusual shapes, angles, and distortions, turning it into a visually unforgettable piece. And now imagine the 1987 D penny also displaying a massive die crack running across Lincoln's face or behind the Lincoln Memorial, a flaw created when the striking die fractures from stress, producing raised metal lines or broken die cuts on the struck coin. And when die cracks become severe, they form dramatic raised blobs along the rim known as cuds. And cut errors alone can make coins worth hundreds or thousands. And if the theoretical $5 million 1987 D penny contained a huge cut covering part of the design, combined with double or triple strikes, off-center shifts, broad strikes, and a wrong planchet, the coin would be practically priceless. And then imagine adding a die clash error, where the obverse and reverse dies accidentally smash into each other without a planchet in between, transferring faint outlines from one side of the coin onto the opposite side, meaning you might see ghostly shapes of the Lincoln Memorial behind Lincoln's bust or faint outlines of Lincoln's head behind the reverse design. And collectors love dramatic die clashes, especially when they intersect with other major errors, adding another layer of rarity. And then imagine combining all of that with a rotation error, where the obverse and reverse designs are misaligned by perhaps 30 degrees, 90 degrees, or even 180 degrees, creating a shocking effect when the coin is flipped, because collectors immediately recognize rotated dies and value them highly. And then imagine that this mythical 1987 D penny also displays a struck-through error, where debris such as grease, metal shavings, cloth fibers, or other objects become trapped between the die and the planchet during the strike, removing design elements or leaving behind indentations or unusual shapes. And grease-filled die strikes in particular can cause Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or parts of Lincoln's portrait to appear faint, smeared, or missing entirely. and on a coin that already contains extreme multiple strike errors, struck-through features would add yet another level of dramatic visual chaos. And now imagine adding plating errors, such as blistering caused by improper bonding of copper plating to the zinc core, creating raised bubbles across the surface that make the coin look warped or diseased, and severe plating. Blisters can create dramatic visuals that collectors find fascinating, especially on older zinc cents, and adding these errors to an already impossible combination elevates the coin's hypothetical value even further. And then imagine a partial collar error where one side of the coin's rim is flared or exhibits the famous railroad rim texture caused by only part of the retaining collar making contact during striking. And collectors love partial collar errors because they show a mechanical failure at the moment of minting. And imagine combining this with multiple off-center strikes and a broad strike to create a coin that seems almost stretched or melted, yet entirely produced by the minting process. And then imagine a mule error, where the obverse of the 1987 D penny is struck with a reverse die intended for a different denomination or foreign coin, and although mule errors are extremely rare, they are among the most valuable mint mistakes ever discovered, with some selling for hundreds of thousands or millions. And the mere possibility of a mule involving a 1987 D penny fuels the myth of a multimillion-dollar specimen. And imagine further that the coin also exhibits hub-doubling features, meaning the die itself was produced with doubled design elements, creating dramatic doubling in the date, the D mint mark, Lincoln's Eye, Liberty, or In God We Trust. And while 1987 double dies are rare, collectors imagine. Next 1991 cent coin. Everyone, and thank you for joining me once again on this fascinating journey into the world of rare coins, unbelievable discoveries, and the incredible stories behind tiny pieces of metal that end up being worth life-changing amounts of money. And today we are diving deep into one of the most astonishing tales in modern numismatics, a story that captures the imagination of collectors, treasure hunters, and curious viewers all around the world, because we are talking about the mysterious, unexpected, and wildly valuable 1991 cent coin that stunned experts, shocked collectors, and ended up commanding a staggering value of $4 million due to a combination of rare errors, minting anomalies, and unique historical circumstances that make this single penny one of the most sought-after modern coins ever. And as we explore this unbelievable tale, we are going to walk through every possibility, every error type, every hypothetical scenario, every production flaw, and every minting mishap that could have given birth to this incredible $4 million rarity, because for a coin like this to reach such a monumental valuation, it must have something extraordinary hidden beneath its copper-plated surface, something that defies typical minting standards and pushes collectors into a frenzy of speculation and excitement. And as we begin this long and detailed journey, remember that the value of a coin like this doesn't simply appear out of thin air. Instead, it builds on layers of mystery, scarcity, speculation, condition, provenance, and the enthralling allure of the unknown, all of which contribute to a coin transforming from a regular everyday piece of change into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And when discussing a coin from 1990, a year often glossed over in the world of numismatic legends, it becomes even more compelling to imagine how a simple cent minted during a period of routine production and modern technology could end up breaking every expectation and becoming such an unimaginable prize. So let's start unraveling the possibilities, beginning with the essential context of how errors occur at the United States Mint, because even though the machinery and processes have evolved over time to be far more precise and regulated, mistakes still slip through the cracks. And sometimes those mistakes align so perfectly and so uniquely that they give birth to a once-in-a-lifetime coin like the legendary 1991 cent, worth $4 million. And one of the first possibilities collectors point to is the chance that this special coin was a transitional error. And transitional errors, as many of you know, are among the most valuable types of mint mistakes because they occur when dies or planchets from different years, metals, or specifications accidentally mix, resulting in a coin that technically should not exist. And although 1990 was not a year of major composition changes for the cent like the famous 1982 transition from bronze to copper-plated zinc, there are always theoretical possibilities, such as leftover planchets from earlier years somehow making their way into the presses. And if a 1990 cent were accidentally struck on a wrong planchet, let's say a leftover bronze planchet from before 1982, or perhaps even a foreign coin planchet similar in size, then the rarity and value of such a piece would immediately skyrocket. and if that hypothetical wrong planchet 1990 cent also had some additional striking anomalies layered on top of it, the value could soar even higher, and in the world of rare coins, rarity stacked upon rarity is the perfect recipe for astronomical worth. And speaking of striking anomalies, another possibility behind the $4 million valuation is the idea that the coin could have been double struck, or even triple struck, with one or more of the strikes being dramatically off-center while still preserving key design details such as the date, mint mark, and critical elements of the portrait. And these kinds of dramatic errors capture the attention of serious collectors because they show the raw, mechanical, unpredictable side of minting, almost like a snapshot of a machine malfunction frozen forever in metal. And a 1990 cent with a massive off-center strike combined with a clean, legible date would automatically be worth thousands. And if you add additional anomalies such as a rotated die strike or misaligned die strike, the coin's uniqueness increases, and with uniqueness comes massive value. And it is not out of the realm of imagination to consider a scenario where a combination of errors escalates the value to the millions, especially if the coin is literally one of a kind, and the 1990 cent in question, the one that captured the attention of the collector world and climbed up the valuation ladder until it reached the unbelievable price of $4 million, could have been precisely such a one-of-a-kind anomaly, a coin that accidentally merged multiple minting mistakes into one perfect storm of rarity and confusion. And then we must also consider the possibility of a no mintmark error or a misplaced mintmark error, both of which are highly desirable in the numismatic world. And while the 1990 cent is known for the famous 1990 no-s proof error, which has commanded high prices in auctions, the idea of a similarly rare circulation strike error such as a 1990 cent missing its mintmark entirely or showing a misplaced D mintmark punched in an unusual location could create a frenzy unlike anything seen in modern coin collecting. Because misplaced mintmarks are particularly fascinating, they reflect human involvement in the pre-1990 era when mintmarks were sometimes still hand-punched, and although automation increased significantly over the years, edge case scenarios still existed where unusual mintmark placement could occur. And if this $4 million 1990 cent possessed a mintmark anomaly that had never been documented before, perhaps one placed exceptionally high, low, sideways, doubled, or even punched twice in two different positions, that alone could form the basis for an astounding value. And when adding the potential for doubling, we open another treasure chest of possibilities, because double die errors remain among the most coveted mint mistakes in history. And while the classic examples from 1955, 1969, and 1972 are the best known, it is entirely possible that a previously undiscovered double die from 1990 could exist. And if that doubling were dramatic, showing clear separation in the date, liberty, or the motto, then its rarity combined with perfect preservation could push its valuation far into 6 figures or even 7 figures, especially if only one example were known. But imagine, for a moment, that this specific 1990 cent did not just exhibit a typical double die but instead displayed an extreme case, a double die with powerful spread across the entire obverse, combined with die deterioration, combined with a rotated die, combined with a misaligned strike, all layered into one impossible seeming creation that should not exist but somehow does. And when we imagine that level of intense rarity, the idea of a $4 million valuation starts to feel a lot more believable. And then there is the theory of a mule error, which is one of the rarest and most valuable types of mint mistakes in existence, because a mule occurs when a coin is struck using dies that were never meant to be paired together, such as mismatched obverse and reverse dies. And historically, mule coins have commanded enormous sums at auction, sometimes reaching hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And if such an error occurred in 1990, perhaps a cent struck accidentally with the reverse die of another denomination or vice versa, then the rarity of that coin would be beyond comprehension. And if only one such piece survived, its value could easily escalate into the multi-million-dollar range. And many collectors love to imagine hidden mule coins drifting through circulation unnoticed, waiting for the keen eye of a curious collector to spot the anomaly. And the idea that a 1991 cent could be one such hidden treasure fuels the imagination even further, especially if the mule pairing were so unusual that experts could not immediately explain how it happened. And when a coin possesses not only rarity but also mystery, the market reacts with overwhelming enthusiasm and speculation alone can sometimes drive prices sky high, especially if intense bidding wars erupt among wealthy collectors who want to own something no one else on Earth has. And another possibility behind the extraordinary valuation of this 1991 cent is the involvement of die breaks and cuts, which are highly collectible because they reflect dramatic failures in the dies used to strike coins, and if the 1990 cent in question featured an enormous die break covering part of Lincoln's portrait or an impressive cut on the rim that distorted the design in a unique and eye-catching way, it could have easily become a Holy Grail era coin, especially if the break created a visually stunning or symbolically interesting shape, because collectors sometimes respond emotionally when an error forms an unusual pattern, such as a shape resembling an object, letter. Last 2021 D1 cent coin, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me again on this incredible deep dive journey into the world of rare coins, unbelievable discoveries, and shocking hidden treasures that could be sitting unnoticed in your change jar, because today we are exploring one of the most astonishing, mind-bending and thrilling stories in modern numismatics. A story that pushes the boundaries of what collectors thought possible and proves once again that even the most recent coins can sometimes turn into jaw-dropping multi-million-dollar treasures, and I'm talking about the mysterious, unexpected, and unbelievably valuable 2021 D1 cent coin, a coin that looks completely ordinary to millions of people, yet somehow one single extraordinary specimen emerged with such rare and unimaginable errors that it skyrocketed to a value of $3 million, shocking experts, hypnotizing collectors, and rewriting the conversation about what modern minting mistakes are truly capable of. And in this long and fully immersive exploration, we're going to unpack every possibility, every minting anomaly, every mechanical malfunction, every error theory, every hypothetical scenario, every dramatic twist, and every microscopic detail that could have contributed to this 2021 D penny becoming one of the most valuable modern cents ever documented. Because for a coin minted in a year as recent as 2021 to reach the staggering price of $3 million, something beyond ordinary must have occurred, something so unusual, so unlikely, so unique, and so layered with mistakes that its existence defies logic. And as we begin this immersive journey, just imagine how many billions of coins were minted in 2021, how many of them passed through vending machines, car cup holders, pockets, purses, laundromats, gas station counters, and cash drawers around the country, and yet, among all of those billions of ordinary coins, one single extraordinary cent emerged that would eventually be recognized as a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of minting chaos, a coin whose value was driven by a perfect storm of wild errors, breathtaking preservation, and the irresistible allure of numismatic curiosity. And let's begin by exploring one of the core theories behind its multi-million-dollar valuation, the possibility that the coin was a dramatic double strike error. And double strike errors are always exciting, especially when both strikes are bold, clear, misaligned, and visually shocking, because when a second strike lands at a different angle or position, the resulting effect can create ghost-like duplicate images, distorted outlines, stretched lettering, double dates, and surreal patterns that collectors instantly recognize as rare and desirable. And if this particular 2021 D cent was double struck in an extreme fashion, perhaps with a visibly rotated second strike or a massive misalignment that partially overlapped Lincoln's portrait and pushed the date into a warped, elongated shape, then its rarity would already be extraordinary. But imagine that this double strike happened on a coin that also had other dramatic issues layered beneath the surface, such as a die clash or a misaligned die or a feeder finger strike through, because when multiple errors stack together, their individual rarity multiplies, creating a once-in-a-lifetime error combination that sends collectors into a frenzy. And that brings us to another intriguing possibility: the coin may have been struck on a wrong planchet, and wrong planchet errors are among the most sought-after and valuable mistakes in numismatics, because they represent moments where the minting process failed in a spectacular way, such as when planchets intended for another denomination or even another country are fed into the presses by mistake. And although modern minting is extremely automated and precise, odd mismatches can still happen, especially during transitional periods or when leftover blanks from foreign coinage contracts remain in the facility. And if the 2021 D cent was accidentally struck on a foreign bronze planchet, steel planchet, dime planchet, or even a leftover test planchet used for calibration, the resulting coin would immediately become a rare and priceless collectible, especially if its weight, color, thickness, or metallic composition did not match typical 2021 copper-plated zinc cents, and that anomaly alone could boost the coin's value into six figures, but when combined with other errors, the valuation could skyrocket. And speaking of other errors, one theory that collectors have obsessed over is whether this 2021 D cent could have been a mule error, because mule coins, where mismatched obverse and reverse dies are accidentally paired, are among the rarest and most valuable errors in existence. And if a 2021 cent had been accidentally paired with a reverse die from another denomination, such as a dime or a nickel, or even a leftover die meant for a commemorative strike, the resulting coin would be so shockingly rare that even the most seasoned collectors would scramble to own it, and with rarity comes competition, and with competition comes skyrocketing bids, and with skyrocketing bids comes multi-million-dollar records, and as we continue unraveling possibilities, another scenario emerges: dramatic die deterioration combined with a late-stage die break, because die breaks, cuts, and cracks create visually stunning effects that collectors love. Especially when the break forms a large raised blob or chunk of metal on the rim or interior fields, and if the 2021 D cent featured a massive cut that distorted Lincoln's portrait, obliterated part of the date, or caused dramatic bubbling and swelling across the obverse or reverse, the coin would immediately stand out as unique. And collectors particularly adore coins where the die break takes on a memorable or recognizable shape, because emotional connection drives bidding wars higher. And moving forward into even stranger territory, imagine the coin was the result of a full grease strike, or partial grease strike, where grease and debris clogged the die so thoroughly that letters, numbers, and design elements were missing entirely, leaving ghost-like impressions and faint outlines instead of sharp detail. And if the date or mint mark were partially missing due to such a grease-filled die, the uniqueness would attract enormous attention, but imagine combining that with a doubled die or a misaligned strike or a broad strike, and suddenly you have a multi-layered error masterpiece that collectors would fight passionately to obtain, especially if only one example existed, because nothing drives value more than the phrase, one known specimen, and as we explore further, the possibility of a dramatic off-center strike becomes another compelling piece of this puzzle, because the more off-center a coin is, the rarer and more visually striking it becomes, and if the 2021 D cent were struck 90% off-center while still retaining a fully readable date and mint mark, something incredibly unlikely, the resulting coin would be a holy grail error, one that collectors would pay almost anything for, and especially if the off-center strike occurred on a wrong planchet or with a double die or alongside a strike-through, the resulting combination would be unprecedented and invaluable. And that brings us to another fascinating error possibility, a feeder finger strike-through, where mechanical components of the minting equipment leave deep gouges, drag marks, or ghost-like impressions across the coin, and a dramatic feeder finger error, especially one that crosses important design features, could bring enormous value. And if this 2021 D cent featured large, deep, dramatic feeder finger scrapes across the fields or stretching through Lincoln's portrait, collectors would immediately recognize its rarity. And then we must consider die clashes, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghost-like images of the reverse design on the obverse and vice versa. And if the 2021 D cent displayed an intense die clash, perhaps showing ghostly outlines of the shield behind Lincoln's head or faint impressions of Lincoln's portrait behind the Union shield, the coin would instantly become desirable, especially if combined with multiple other errors. And we cannot ignore the possibility of rotational misalignment, where the obverse and reverse are rotated relative to each other by 30, 45, 90, or even 180 degrees, and dramatic rotation errors are extremely collectible. And if the 2021 D cent had a perfect 180-degree rotation, meaning the reverse was completely upside down relative to the obverse, that error alone could boost its value significantly, but combined with other anomalies could push it into legendary status. And then comes the even more mind-bending possibility that the coin was struck using a damaged die, creating dramatic spiked die cracks, shattered die fragments, or extreme die chips, all of which leave bold raised metal scars on the coin's surface. And if the 2021 D penny featured a massive die chip in Lincoln's eye or beard, or a crack stretching across the obverse like a lightning bolt, or a reverse chip in the shield that created a distinctive raised blob, collectors would recognize it as remarkable. But imagine again that multiple errors occurred in combination, stacking their rarity.